If you've been feeling a little stuck and you are ready for some momentum in 2026, this episode is for you because we're going to be talking about the Chinese New Year and the Chinese calendar and essentially the year of the snake, which is 2025, transitioning into the year of the horse into 2026.
Welcome to the Spiral Up podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lachelle Weemy, a peak performance coach and business strategist dedicated to helping you see what's possible within you, the blind spots that are holding you back, and the solutions to ensure success and fulfillment without the hustle. I use my secret sauce of metaphysics, brain science, and scripture to work with God to manifest your ideal life and business. If you're ready to create massive forward momentum in your business and bust through the blocks that drag you down, join me on the Spiral Up journey and create the clarity, confidence, and consistency to become the CEO that lives your life by design. It's time to create the sustainable impact, income, and time freedom you desire faster. Now is the time to spiral up.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Spiral Up podcast and welcome to a brand new year. We are kicking off 2026 and I don't know about you guys, but I am freaking excited because so many of us have said that 2025 has been hard, right? It feels like there's been some stagnant energy. It feels like maybe I'm having to do a lot of internal processing and I'm not seeing external rewards. Maybe it just feels like everything has been heavy this year. And I hear that over and over again. And I'm just going to tell you that we are moving into a new transition, into a new transformative process. And I am so sick and excited. So if you've been feeling a little stuck and you are ready for some momentum in 2026, this episode is for you because we are going to be talking about the Chinese New Year and the Chinese calendar and essentially the year of the snake, which is 2025, transitioning into the year of the horse into 2026. And oh my goodness, like I hope that not only does this episode validate where you've been feeling stuck, but also gives you the amazing momentum and energy and excitement for what's to come. And I want to just start off by just saying that I've been a little bit fascinated since I have learned of this technique because I'll be honest with you, following the Chinese calendar has not been something that I have ever paid attention to, honestly. But once I heard about some of the idiosyncrasies of it and really validating what I have felt this last year and what I have heard so many of my clients talk about, and then really validating truly where I feel like I'm being pulled to into this next year, I could not help but share. I was so sick and excited about sharing. So let's dive into this first and acknowledge what the Chinese calendar is and just kind of give us some context. Because if you have been following me for a while, you know that I like to understand the why behind things. I don't just buy into methodologies blindly. I really love to know kind of the history behind things. And then I get to decide what I'm willing to adapt. And I want, this to give you guys a little bit of background knowledge as well. So the Chinese calendar is actually a lunar solar calendar, right? So it works with the moon cycles and it's actually a 2,000-year-old pattern in which they observed patterns. They observed patterns in nature. They observed patterns in seasons. They observed patterns in human behavior. And these show up in a 12-year cycle. And what it does is it really has helped to bring some clarity around things historically, like agriculture, like governance, like medicine, and even some social rhythms. And really what I want to acknowledge here is that the Chinese calendar is not a prediction. It's not going to tell us the future. What it does is it helps to acknowledge cycles, and it helps us to recognize that when patterns and when cycles present themselves, it literally just validates honestly what we see and what we are feeling. And it gives us a little bit of clarity and maybe confidence around oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. This is exactly how I feel. And it gives you that extra oomph to be able to take action, right? And that's what I'm hoping that this does for you in the year of the horse coming forward. And so again, these are 12-year cyclical systems. And what they do is they really help us to observe God's order. Remember that God works through order and rhythm and timing. And what God does is not evolve from chaos or pressure. It literally is getting into flow with God and recognizing these patterns. And so when we recognize that this is indeed a lunar solar calendar, we recognize then that it doesn't necessarily start January 1st like our normal calendar does. But in fact, in the year 2026, the Chinese New Year will start on February 17th. So, February 17th, you're probably going to start noticing the shift. But in this transition between January 1st and February 17th, you're probably starting to awaken, I guess, to these themes and to recognize, like, oh my gosh, like that's why I felt that way. And really allowing ourselves to process, to reflect, to kind of button up that healing so that we're ready for the momentum that is to come for us in this next season in 2026, right? And you're going to find that these transitions that happen every single year at the Chinese New Year are always impactful. They really truly are. But this year, between what is the year of the snake from 2025 transitioning into the year of the horse in 2026, we are going to notice the contrast is so abrupt that it's going to feel like this massive change in momentum. It's going to feel definitely more noticeable because the yin and the yang, the asleep versus the awakened, the dark versus the light, is going to be so drastic and dramatic that we cannot help but recognize the contrast. And it's going to be way more noticeable than perhaps some of the other transitions that would happen in other years. Okay. So, what I thought I would do next is just describe to you likely what you experienced as a cycle awareness from the past year of 2025, the year of the snake. Now, the snake represents internal transformation, right? So if you felt like this year was heavy, if it felt like you maybe felt even more alone than normal, if you felt like you were possibly laying foundations underneath and you couldn't quite put your finger on it, that's exactly what was happening in this year. That internal transformation really represented the shedding of things, the shedding of identities that are no longer going to serve you in this next year of massive forward momentum. And really, the year of the snake is all about truth telling. It's about us facing parts of ourselves, facing trauma, facing subconscious beliefs, facing shadow work that we have to acknowledge in order to then release so that we can step into the identity that we have coming into this next season. It's also been a season of nervous system recalibration. So you might have noticed a little bit more awareness in your body. You might have noticed that anxious feeling. You might have noticed where the heaviness in your shoulders just felt really heavy this year. You might have noticed when things just felt out of alignment and you couldn't put your finger on it, but you could just feel it. That nervous system recalibration, that nervous system awareness is definitely a theme that I've seen in myself and my clients and my audience from this year, the 2025 year of the snake. And so in real life, where I've seen this happen over and over again with myself and the people that I've talked to is relationships are a huge part of this. Relationships change. Relationships become in a place where you recognize what you're no longer willing to tolerate. You start to recognize what you feel like you're worth. You start to recognize when you feel there's a misalignment of energy, maybe feeling taken advantage of. It's like this moment of time where you're like, I no longer want to accept this for myself. And then there's this shedding of these relationships. And sometimes it comes from a conscious decision, like, I am no longer going to allow for this to happen. And you have a conversation or a falling out or whatever. And sometimes it literally just happens automatically behind the scenes where you recognize that relationships just fall away, that you don't talk to somebody as often as you used to. Things just seem different. And I've had both things happen in my life where people that have been really important to me, we just started to fall apart with, or not fall apart, just what's the word I'm looking for? Like going different paths without any kind of dramatic anything, without any big conversation. It was just like a noticeable thing where like, I haven't talked to this person for a while, or I see what they're doing on social media and it just like good for them. That's cool. But I'm just not like involved in the day to day. Right. And sometimes that comes with pain. And sometimes it's kind of like, oh, isn't that interesting? Right. And then there's other relationships where I'm just like making a conscious effort to be like, this is no longer something I'm willing to tolerate anymore. And just noticing this changing in these relationships. The other theme that I've seen this year is business models seem really heavy and misaligned. This is where I feel like the acknowledgement from who I speak to and how I help really was birthed this year, in the sense of recognizing myself where I was no longer willing to tolerate the hustle for the sake of hustling, no longer willing to work myself to the bone without the results that I was expecting, no longer willing to give up time and peace and freedom in order to have this perceived success when the success wasn't happening. And so once I started to recognize what I was no longer willing to tolerate, I was able to then start to build systems that were more in alignment. And I feel like this year for me and the year before that was about recognizing that pattern and recognizing what I was no longer willing to tolerate, what I no longer wanted to experience, recognizing that I was literally trading my peace for profits, recognizing that I was giving up core values like my time and freedom to travel in order for me to be able to essentially stay in my self-contained box of what I thought my business needed to be like, right? And so it was that recognition, it was then building the foundations and building the structures underneath that was going to be able to then be implemented in this next year of the horse. But it was this year was about recognizing what I was no longer wanting. It was recognizing what I wanted, was recognizing the foundational pieces of the systems and the support that I needed to have in place in order for us to be able to step into this next year. So this year was really just about getting rid of the things that no longer were part of what I wanted, both in my mindset, but also in the systems, the organization of my business. I also recognized that there was just an overall intolerant, I guess, in what I was no longer willing to do anymore. It's like, I just can't do this anymore, was a theme that I had in my mind, and the things that I've heard over and over with my clients. It's like, I recognize that I just can't, deal with this part of my relationship anymore. I just can't have this be a part of my business anymore. I just can't be in my 9 to 5 when I really want to be in my entrepreneur journey. I just can't take this anymore. It's like this intolerance becomes so heavy that you're like, it's like, how can I, the best way for me to describe it is like, you have on this like really tight dress, right? And it's like, you put it on and you're like, I can deal with this. I can deal with this for the night. And then by the end of the night, you're like, oh my God, get this freaking thing off of me. Like, that's what I'm talking about here. It's like, you just like hit a point of your threshold where you're like, get this off. I don't like it. It doesn't feel comfortable. It's too tight. I don't want this anymore. Right. And that's what this, and then you shed it, right? You shed it. And that's what we're doing in this year of 2025 as we transition into the official start of the new year in February, is really seeing like, what parts of my life do I no longer want to tolerate. And then chances are you felt that this year was slower. Maybe it felt like you weren't gaining as much traction as that you thought you would. The outward measurements of success weren't following your perceived efforts. Maybe you felt a little lonelier. Maybe you noticed that relationship shift, obviously, like with ending of significant partners or partnerships in business or clients or what the case may be. Or maybe it was just like this slow shedding of people behind the scenes, but for whatever reason, you felt a little lonelier. Maybe this year felt more emotionally intense, where you had to feel things that you've been burying down. Things started to surface that you didn't necessarily want to have to face, but here they are, right? And you notice that your emotions just feel more vibrant. They feel heavy, and it's because your consciousness is trying to present them to you. Because when you see it, you can do something about it. In order for us to be able to shed things, we have to be able to see them first, right? It's I have to be able to recognize that that dress is too tight. I have to see it in order for then me to take it off. And this is really part of the shedding process. And it also feels like 2025 might have felt slow. It might have felt painful. And this is where people are like, oh my God, get me out of this cycle, right? This is oftentimes where people choose to invest in coaching. This is where people choose to invest in therapy or systems in order to help them to reflect or to do things. I've seen a lot of people utilizing ChatGPT. They say ChatGPT is like my best friend, right? Because we have a safe place to mirror, to be able to process emotions with. And this is really where it's just us taking the time to reflect, to do inward work, But oftentimes this can feel really painful. And so what I want you to do when we think about this particular transition from the year of the snake in 2025 to the new year of the horse in 2026, in order for us to be able to really allow for the integration, I guess, of the shedding of the old identities and to be able to then receive the momentum that's waiting for us in 2026, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions for you to reflect on, right? One of them might be, where you outgrow what you keep trying to resurrect, right? Like, um, it's like, okay, I know that I need to do this, but for whatever reason, like you just keep trying to resurrect it. Maybe it's a relationship, like, oh, if I just try one more time. And it's like you're trying to force something that doesn't want to be forced anymore. Maybe it's a business practice. Like maybe you've been, doing a podcast and you're like, this does not feel aligned anymore. And so but you keep trying to resurrect it. You're forcing things. And so I'm going to ask you, what did you outgrow, but you keep trying to resurrect? One of the things that I'm going to get into my own personal experience here in just a moment. But one of the things that I noticed is that I have really shed some perspectives I've had from religious dogma and allowing for God to reveal his truth to me. And there are times where I find myself, grasping at old patterns of what has always felt safe, even though they don't feel aligned anymore, if that makes any sense. So I'm just going to ask you, like, what are you trying to force or resurrect that you've outgrown? And then I want to ask you, what old identity do you keep putting on out of habit? Maybe it's the people pleasing part of you that never, says no to somebody. Maybe it's, you know, um, the control or the perfectionism just to feel safe. Like, what old identity do you keep putting on out of habit? And then the last question I'm going to ask you is, where are you realizing that you do not want this thing to come with you into the next season? Like, what parts of you are you're like, you know what, that is going to hold me back. Like, I am no longer willing to take that part of me into this next season. Like, I need to let that go. Right. So I'm going to ask you, where are you realizing there are parts of you? Maybe it's in your psyche, maybe it's shadow work, maybe it's relationships maybe it's old systems and patterns of hustle that you are recognizing are not welcome in this next season so that we can identify it. Okay. So, what I want to do next is recognize what the year of the horse is meant to represent. And before I do that, though, I feel like I want to give you guys some insight, and I could have an entire podcast conversation on just this one lesson that I have out there, and I will probably do one here very shortly in the near future. But for now, I'm just going to say that I noticed a theme where I would avoid hard conversations. And so, what did that mean? That meant that I would say yes to things that I didn't want to do. It's meant that I would tolerate behavior from people that I no longer wanted to tolerate. It meant that I just allowed for myself to stay put or be held back because I was resisting hard conversations. Okay. Now, I knew that this next year has really, really big momentum happening for me. Even before I started to dive into the Chinese calendar, I knew it. I could feel it, right? This is what I was saying about this validating energy. And I recognized that in order for me to be the leader, in order for me to be the thought leader, in order for me to be the person with the peace and the power and the joy that I know I can be, I needed to stop resisting conversations. Okay. And I needed to start facing them. Right. But I had to go down this path where I recognize where the root cause of those were and recognizing that it wasn't that the conversations were hard. It was that I was making them hard because I was making them something that they necessarily didn't have to be or they weren't at all. And that I was attaching a story to something. And one of the themes being is that I have felt my entire life, and again, I'm going to do an episode on this, in more detail, but my whole life feeling like I was responsible for somebody else's emotions. And the reason those conversations felt so hard was because I felt like I was responsible for them if they were sad or if they were angry or if they didn't understand. And I didn't want them to feel that way. I'm a very empathetic person. And so what would happen was, in order for me to shield myself from that uncomfortableness, I would avoid the conversation altogether. And I recognize that that is a pattern that I'm no longer willing to tolerate, and that this year is all about stepping into my power and my momentum and my impact, right? And so when I acknowledged, like, oh my gosh, like I want to stop doing this, all of a sudden things started to show up in my life to give me the hints and the clues of why that was happening. And then I would get lessons upon lessons upon lessons in order for me to face it and to pivot and to see, oh my gosh, there it came up again. I must have some more work on this. And so, what I want you to do is recognize, like, where are those patterns for you? And where are you starting to recognize, like, okay, no longer am I willing to do this in the future? So now let's go ahead and dive into the year of the horse, because this is what's going to be exciting, at least for me. It's like, let's get out of the mud and the muck and the quicksand that we feel like we've been in, right? And let's get into action. And that's exactly what the year of the horse is representing. And I want to remind you that this is not a prediction, right? It's literally just pattern recognition of general cycles and flow. And what I believe that this is going to do for all of us, right, is recognize, like, okay, if this is a cycle that has been seen for 2000 years, why not just embrace it and allow myself to ride with this wave and to take advantage of what is possible within it, right? So the horse, what does the horse represent? It represents forward motion. It represents being committed and intentional with taking action. And it really is aligned with visibility. So being willing to be seen, to be willing to be a thought leader, to have courageous action. It's expansion with movement. I just got done with our strategic planning workshop that we just did a couple of days ago. And by the way, if you want I have all of that as a mini course. So the aligned strategic planning strategy with the replay of the vision board workshop and everything is actually inside of my vault. It's a mini course. And so if you guys want that, I will have a list inside of the show notes for this. But point being is that this is all about taking action. And what we did at the workshop is I helped people to align themselves with the correct action that's being guided by spirit. So this is no longer just getting stuck in the mud and the self-evaluation, internal processing. This is now taking all of that, the fruits of that labor, and moving it into massive forward momentum. It's freedom through commitment, not avoidance. And again, I just want to remember that we are not using this as a prediction, but rather as an opportunity for us to consciously accept the shift. And I don't know about you, but I just get excited when I think about, like, okay, yes, bring it on, right? Now, the year of the horse rewards certain action. It rewards clear decisions. Your momentum is going to be rewarded with clear decisions. It's going to be rewarded with consistency over intensity. It's going to be rewarded with trusting your body, not just your brain this time, because you've been working on that this last year. It's going to reward choosing direction and then staying with it long enough to actually build momentum and power. So if we are able to kind of take all of these things together, we're going to acknowledge the fact that the year of the snake has been a lot of our inner work. And we're transitioning then to the outward expansion of what that can be, the fruits of our labor, right? And and I know that 2025 probably seemed slow, maybe even painful, but something deeper was happening to prepare you for this season. And we recognize what no longer felt good. We recognize the inauthentic parts of ourselves that were no longer welcome. We recognize that hustle for the sake of hustling was no longer welcome. We recognize that saying yes to things that don't feel aligned no longer feel welcome. We recognize that avoiding and resisting things are not going to get us where we want to go. And so we're shedding that. We recognize burnout signals faster. We recognize where we have trauma patterns that keep coming up. And we recognized this last year where those toxic relationships keep surfacing and where we've been tolerating them. Now, oftentimes, too, I will say that the year of the snake has been associated with oftentimes just internal processing. Maybe again, where you are like, oh my gosh, Lachelle, like, yes, my chat GPT and I have been best friends because I haven't felt safe enough to have these conversations with anybody else. So maybe you've just been having conversations with your chat GPT. Maybe you've just been journaling it. Maybe you've just been in intense conversations in prayer with God. And oftentimes these internal shedding processes that happen in the year of the snake don't happen in the public space. They don't happen with public vulnerability and authenticity. It happens inside of our hearts, inside of our minds. And this year, then, as we transition, is going to be about sharing those authentic processes. It's about acknowledging where we've come and where we're going. It's about grabbing other people and taking them with us to this next place. And I got to just tell you that I have felt something inside of me for a while now where I knew that there was something in my horizon. And I think back on at the beginning of 2025, I was utilizing one of my tools called the Hub, which allows me to essentially use multi-sensory tools to get me into theta brainwave. And I was able to get into theta in order to pray and allow for my inner guidance to teach me and show me where this year is going to take me. And it's interesting because what I saw makes more sense now, because what I saw was me standing on this giant stage. Like I'm talking like in front of like a stadium of people, and I could feel this momentum. I could feel it. And people were, cheering, and we were all, like hyped up. But in this vision, they weren't cheering for me. They were cheering with me. It was like they weren't looking at me as like this thing. It was like I was one of them, if that makes any sense. And we were part of a movement together. And so the word movement just kept coming up over and over again in different visualizations and meditations that I've had throughout this entire year. And I'm recognizing now that the year of the snake has been preparing me to do the internal healing so that as we transition into the year of the horse, that momentum, that movement, that thought leadership that I have inside of me is now ready to be verbalized, is ready to be vocalized. I've had the transition from fear to courage around that, to being okay with being judged, being okay with being different than what people think I'm going to be, being allowing people to shed ideas that are no longer in alignment, and allowing the rebirth, the remembering of who we are at our core. And that's where part of the things that I have been learning and feeling and transitioning as my foundation are going to then be expressed this year. And I cannot wait to allow this particular podcast to be part of that platform. You guys are going to be the first to hear many of these transitional mind-blowing thought processes that are different than what we've been taught, but feel in your core like they're correct. And it's like now is the time where all of our consciousness has been able to be ready for what I'm about to share. And it's so freaking cool when you think about that, because it's not just me, it's the audience, it's you guys that are learning how to read your body, that you're learning how to recognize truth and untruth. You're learning how to remember who you are and what you're capable of. And all of us together get to be part of this movement. Oh my goodness, like I am so freaking excited for this. Are you? So if you're recognizing that this is the year of the horse, that you want massive forward momentum, that you're ready to have somebody walk alongside of you, go ahead and go into the show notes and schedule yourself one of my 5-figure strategy calls so that we can really start to get you into the momentum and the correct action. There are things that I can do. I just added it to my calendar to open myself up for several like 4-hour strategy sessions one-on-one where I could individualize what I'm doing for people. Like there's lots of things that I'm going to be utilizing this energy to help other people. And I want you guys to know that you have a partner with me, whether it be to cheer you on, whether it be to just continue to inspire you in this podcast, or if you're really, truly ready to work alongside of me in this space, like we got you, right? We got each other. And so here's the 2026. Here's to honoring the shit show that might have been 2025. And here's to honoring all the things that are calling us in, pulling us into the year of the horse of 2026. I cannot wait to reflect back on this year and be able to share out with one another what this year has looked like. But if you felt that this last year has been hard, and I see you, I hear you, I'm holding space for you. And I cannot wait to move into this next transition with you. All right, you guys, I will see you next week. And just continue to spiral up, friends. You got a big impact to make.
so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Each honest review helps me spiral up so that I can serve you even better. Whether you're feeling a lack of impact, income, or time freedom, or perhaps you're just ready for massive momentum in your business, let's chat. Apply for a breakthrough call so that you can gain clarity, identify what's holding you back, and make a plan to spiral up. Head on over to im-lifebydesign.com/breakthrough or access the link in the show notes. For immediate support, log into our community, the Better Club. We focus on inspiration, tactical guidance, and support. This is a community that wants to be better, do better, and have better in life and in business, and we're going to help you do the same. Let's spiral up, friends.